Punishment. In May of this year, the South American Football Confederation, known as CONMEBOL, announced the launch of the Enough campaign, or Basta, as we say in Portuguese. No more racism in soccer, after recurrent acts of racial discrimination in the Libertadores and South American Championship tournaments. CONMEBOL considers absolutely any manifestation of racism and other forms of violence in its tournaments unacceptable. Awareness raising aimed at players, referees, and soccer fans will be visible through all the media available as a permanent campaign, said the campaign's announcement. Yes, even though Brazilians continue to deny the depths of racism, even on a field in which all are said to be equal, racist sentiments persist. This is the reason that we cannot simply ignore the facts and just play ball, as many have suggested in sports. Many years ago, rarely did anyone say anything about the racist experience of Black Brazilians on the soccer field. But nowadays, with the rise in Black consciousness in Brazil, there is simply no way to ignore it. This is a picture taken from a 2021 Black Consciousness Day march on Avenida Paulista Avenue in Sao Paulo. So then what does this date really mean, Black Consciousness Day, or the Day of Black Consciousness? Black consciousness is one of those dates established to preserve the memory of the fight for ideals, even if bathed in blood and sedimented by deaths. After commanding the Quilombo dos Pomares for 15 years, the leader Zumbi was killed on November 20th, 1695 in a territory that today belongs to the northeastern state of Alagoas. He led the largest stronghold of resistance to slavery in the colonial period, which reached the size of the country of Portugal and had 30,000 fugitive slaves from plantations, slave quarters, and prisons. Just something I wanted to mention. It was probably a couple of years ago. I remember that the program Dear White People, actually during either the week of November 20th or the actual day of November 20th, the lead character of that program, of that series, actually did a short piece on the importance of Black Consciousness Day in Brazil, and talked a little bit about Zumbi. This, obviously from being in the 17th century, we can't actually know what Zumbi probably looked like, but these are some of the most famous depictions. This is actually a statue. I think this might be in Salvador, Bahia. These are the images that are commonly accepted of what Zumbi might have looked like in the 17th century. He's long been considered the greatest Black rights leader in Brazilian history. So I thought it was intriguing that Dear White People actually included that piece, just talked a little bit about how important this was in Brazilian history. So anyway, when Zumbi was killed, he had his head cut off, salted, and exposed in a public square. The Portuguese authorities wanted to disprove the legend that he was immortal. That year, Pedro II of Portugal awarded 50,000 reis to the captain responsible for Zumbi's murder. Since 2011, the date of the Quilombola leader's death has been celebrated as the National Day of Black Consciousness. The date was written into the national calendar on this specific day after the struggle of many people, from activists to intellectuals, who wanted to make Brazil reflect on how it treats the Black population and sought to establish their own temporal milestones and references. So then, exactly what is Black consciousness? The idea of Black consciousness is related to the valuing of cultures of African origin and the self-esteem of Black populations, both of which have been impacted in various ways by processes of racism. In this way, this permission is connected to Orgulho Negro in Portuguese, or Black Pride in English, a movement for the legitimization of Black aesthetics and the recognition of cultures from the African continent that were suffocated by the European colonization process and the forced displacement promoted by slavery. In addition, the term suggests awareness of racial issues in opposition to the idea of the superiority of white identity. Can't speak too much of this because, as I've long pointed out on the blog and now in the on my YouTube channel, it wasn't very long ago, and you still see this in Brazil today, but it was just very common. When I first started going to Brazil, early 2000s and the 1990s and before, it was just very common for most Brazilians of African descent to actually just deny that they were actually Black or hide their identities behind words that suggest some type of, racial admixture, whether it's mestizo or pardo or moreno or any of these terms to avoid being labeled or classifying themselves as Black. Now, as I've said in posts from the last few years, I've had to reposition myself on this issue, because there's always been these warring factions in Brazil to define, well, who is Black in Brazil? If you talk to activists of the Black movement, they'll tell you that all Blacks and Browns, pretos and pardos, as we say in Portuguese, would be considered part of the Black population in Brazil. Whereas the other side says, look, Brazilians are too mixed to classify everybody into this Black category without falling into US influence, one-dropism. So this is a conclusion that I've come to before. I've had to, reposition myself and say, I do understand that not every Pardo should be counted as Black. And I had to, really start switching my position after I started seeing some of the contradictions in the argument that includes all Pardos as part of the Black population. That's something I'm really going to have to cover in the future, and I'm going to get to that. But for now, I just want to keep going on with this article. But this is why this idea of Black consciousness is such a big deal in Brazil, because it's been years, decades, some would argue centuries, that Black Brazilians have been taught to avoid defining themselves as Black. So then, when did Black consciousness emerge? There are references to the idea of Black consciousness in the work of thinkers such as the Martinican-born psychiatrist, political philosopher, and activist Frantz Fanon, and American sociologist, historian, and activist W.E.B. Du Bois. In Brazil, intellectual Manuel Raimundo Querino, the father of Afro-Brazilian history, highlighted Africans as the civilizing force in Brazil, carrying out studies on African culture, customs, and tradition in the heavily Africanized state of Bahia. That's Bahia is located in the Northeast. It's considered Bahia as a whole and its capital city, Salvador, are just considered the African Mecca, the African center of Brazil. So this is a photo of Manuel Raimundo Querino. So as a movement, the concept took shape with the struggle for independence in the countries of the African continent. In the 1970s, at the peak of apartheid, the racial segregation system that ruled South Africa for almost 5 decades, the Black consciousness movement emerged in the South African country, led by Steve Biko, a Black activist who was arrested, tortured, and murdered at the age of 30. Biko's group organized strikes and actions that sought to expose and undermine racist politics in South Africa. The movement also defended the self-esteem of the Black population with the premise of Black is beautiful, which Brazilians translated as O negro é lindo in Portuguese. In the same period, the MNU, meaning the Movimento Negro Unificado, or the Unified Black Movement, was born in Brazil in the late 70s with the goal of acting together to confront violations of the rights of the Afro-descendant population, such as violent and disproportionate police actions that led to death. I've long said that we know that it's been a struggle for years in the United States, exposing what people consider to be racist violence by the American police system. But when you make the comparison with Brazil, it's like there's just no comparison. It's like Brazil's police kills far more Black people than American police, as hard as that may seem, hard as it may seem to be able to believe that. But, the numbers basically show us that. This is a photo of the Movimento Negro from 1979, like a year after this movement was created. There, the MNU, again, the Movimento Negro Unificado, also began to discuss the creation of a date to symbolize resistance to racism in the country and to oppose May 13th, the date that marks the signing of what's called the Golden Law, which extinguished slavery in Brazil. Activists consider the abolition incomplete since the free Black population didn't receive government assistance or support for access to land, education, or work. So basically, what they're saying here is for many years, Brazilian elites put forth the date of May 13th as a day of reflection of the importance of Black Brazilians, this being the date that slavery was abolished in Brazil. Again, Brazil being the last country in the Western Hemisphere to abolish slavery, 25 years after slavery was abolished in the United States. But activists says, look, we're still not free in this country, abolition or not, we're still treated as second-class citizens. All the social statistics show that, pretos and pardos, blacks and browns in Brazil are still at a very much of a big disadvantage vis-a-vis the white population of those people who consider themselves white in the country. So Brazil instituted Black Consciousness Day in its official calendar 10 years ago. Celebrated on November 20th, the date seeks to reflect on the effects of racism and to raise the self-esteem of the Black population. So 20 de novembro, Dia da Consciência Negra, which is November 20th, the day of Black consciousness in Brazil. Is Black consciousness a holiday in Brazil? Well, the date was established by law 12519, 2011, to draw society's attention to structural racism and proposes to reflect on its consequences for the Black population, such as wage inequality and access to education. In addition, it seeks the recognition of the influence of and presence of the culture of African origin in the country. The holiday, however, is optional and is at the discretion of the states and municipalities. Only 5 states have adopted the date officially as a local holiday. The states of Alagoas, Amazonas, being the Amazon region of the country, Mato Grosso, Amapá, and Rio de Janeiro. So why is November 20th Black Consciousness Day? As I just mentioned, the date was chosen to celebrate the memory of the great Zumbi dos Palmares, who died on November 20th, 1695. Zumbi was the most important leader of the Palmares Quilombo, the largest and most important community experiment formed by escaped enslaved people. The population of Palmares was estimated to be at over 30,000 people. So this is just a piece I wanted to put out here to understand the connection between November 20th, November as a whole, and the start of the World Cup, which, like I said, usually it starts in June or July this year. Because of the immense heat that you'll find in the Middle East, they thought it would be better to schedule the World Cup for November. So it's just saying, wow, look at this, the coincidence of it all. The Brazilian seleção, as they call it, the selection team, the national team, is headed up by mostly Black players this year, or Black players who have made a name for themselves over in European soccer leagues. So, the tournament started on November 20th, which coincides with the November 20th Black Consciousness Day celebrations across Brazil. So keep this in mind as you, if some of you will be tuning into the World Cup. Like I said, the tournament has already started. I know I'll be checking out a couple of games. I'll have to figure out how I'm going to get, I'm quite sure I'll be able to find somewhere that's playing these games. Watching sports is always something that's, it's a group thing. You like to be around people when you're watching these sporting events. And as as the World Cup is not quite as, we know the World Cup is the biggest sporting event when you consider the global population, but in the United States, of course, the Super Bowl remains the top sporting event. So I'm actually looking to find some places where people might be enjoying the World Cup, a game in which Brazil might be playing. So I'm looking forward to this. I'm looking forward to see who are going to be the new superstars that emerge from this team. From what I'm understanding, Neymar, who has long been considered one of the top players in Brazil. He's obviously one of the richest soccer players to ever, lend his talents, over in the European leagues. From what I understand, he's considering that this might be his last World Cup. And up until this point, he hasn't, having participated, I think it was 2014 was his first cup. That was the year that Brazil hosted the World Cup. And it was also the year of that disastrous 7-1 loss at the hands of Germany. I still have my theories on why that happened. But 2014 and 2018, Brazil came up short. Um, so this may be Neymar's last World Cup from what he's saying. He believes this year they have a great team that might be able to bring that trophy back to Brazil. All we can do is wait and see. I'm going to tune in to the games as possible, and maybe keep my own journal on what's going on the field, and keep my eyes on what's going on in Brazil, because of course the whole country is going to be rooting for this team. So anyway, that's my report for World Cup starts on Black Consciousness Day and revives memory of the anti-racist struggle in Brazil. So when you see these Black players on the soccer field representing Brazil, just remember, Black players were not always accepted in Brazil. This country that claims itself as a racial democracy, which it really is not and never has been. There was a lot of fight. There was a lot of struggle for the Black player to take his position on this team and to introduce this, I don't know, what do they call it? It's like a magical way that Brazilians play soccer. I forget what they call it, the wonderful game, right? The beautiful game, right? That's what they call it, the beautiful game. And when you look at what these soccer players do on the field, it's like, even for people who are not big fans of soccer, you have to just marvel at some of the things that these guys can do with their feet. So anyway, don't know if that gives you enough to want to support Brazil on the field. But if you're not just a regular soccer fan, definitely try to check out at least, a couple of games of this World Cup. You might just be converted to a fan. So I'm going to end this video here, and hope to catch you guys, and hope you guys will follow me over and check out my next video. So don't let me forget. Definitely, if you like this video, give me a thumbs up, like the video. Consider leaving a couple of comments. Share your thoughts on this post that combined, Black consciousness with the struggle of Black Brazilian soccer players. And also click on the notification bell just so you can get my latest videos as I pump them up. So looking forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Until then, I'm out.